Let's talk about building models. In the first trade of the day, you were asked to build a model, but you weren't told what a model is. Let me define a model by calling it an algorithm that provides outputs when given inputs. In this case, the output you were looking for was a share price. The inputs that you were given were 9 months of actual cash flows plus 3 months of projected cash flows. And the algorithm was to add up all the cash flows and multiply by 6 to get the share price. So the most concise way you could have done that would have been to type the numbers into a cell in a spreadsheet, and just like using a calculator, add them up and then multiply by 6. You would get the correct answer that way, but it might be a little bit cumbersome to come in and update the new numbers when they came in. So what most of you did was to build a table based on months and cash flows. You were then able to sum up the cash flows and of course multiply by 6 to get the share price. Yet others of you noticed that the formula included the cash flow multiple as a number, and perhaps you thought that that's something that I might try to trick you and change during the earnings release. So you took that number out of the formula and put it in a cell, and then the formula simply referred to the cell. That held the cash flow multiple. Still others of you realized that you would have an actual value, you had a projected value, and you would have an example value. These being the projected and these being the example. And then if you could test that model on all three sets of data, you would have more confidence in the model, because I gave you two share prices for which to test the model. So to do that, you had to do a little bit of rearranging. To get the projected share price, you needed to look at the projected cash flows for the last quarter and the 9 months of actuals prior to that. Now, if we could write this formula in such a way that we could copy it right and left, then we'd have a lot of confidence in the formula. So in order to do so, I want to lock these cells using the dollar signs. So I will highlight them and hit the F4 key. Notice that puts dollar signs or absolute references on all those. I don't want to lock these cells because I want them to move when I copy this left and right. So I want relative references there. And I also will go ahead and put an absolute reference on the cash flow multiple by hitting the F4 key. Now, when I copy that formula to the right, it's still looking at the current, it's still looking at the cash flow, but it's looking for example cash flows now. So let's give it some. And in fact, both the projected and the example prices match what we're given in the problem. So now when we copy this to the actual, we're going to have a lot of faith in it when we type those three numbers in. And since those are our primary inputs during the earnings release, let's come up to cell styles and format those cells as input. Then let's go to the share price and format that cell as our output. Often in the homework you'll see that where I want the answer, I will already have it formatted as an output. Now when we need to get the answer here, we don't want to take that number and type it in. We always want to use a reference. I don't remember what the actual numbers were, but let's say that they were 385, 395, and 405, in which case our answer would have been 250.44. And it shows up in the share price. So the important takeaway here is three modeling rules. Number one, clearly identify inputs and outputs of the model. Number two, never use a number when a formula will do. Number 3, use absolute references wisely so that you can copy a formula across cells.